How come a nation with more than 1 billion people got less than 10 Olympic medals in 2021? Are Indians that bad at sports? Should Indians be ashamed of their sports culture? These are some ugly-sounding questions that numerous foreigners have asked me, and in this episode, I'm going to respond to all of them. But before I do that, let me say a few words about Neeraj Chopra, whose story can inspire many across the world. The official webpage of the Olympics mentions that from an obese kid to qualifying for the Olympics, Neeraj Chopra has come a long way. There was a time when he had to travel 17 kilometers away from his home to get enrolled in a gym in Panipat. His pocket money was about 30 rupees, and there were occasions when he didn't even have money for a glass of juice. But today, he is an Olympic champion. Apart from the resilience that Neeraj showed to overcome the personal and financial hardships that he had to face, his story becomes even more inspiring because we know how the dramatic rise of obesity among adults and children has been concerning the global health experts. Without an element of doubt, his achievement has the power to give hope and inspiration to many. On the other hand, it can't be denied that there are foreigners who find it difficult to understand why India has so few medals in Olympics. In particular, there are even those who go on to shame India by tagging the country as a nation with a poor sports culture. But how hollow or misleading is that? Let's explore that in point number 2. To me, it seems that it is your ignorance or limited understanding of India if you believe that the nation of more than 1 billion has a poor sports culture. Let me attempt to explain that in more direct terms. Many of us admire the great flexibility, rhythm and composure of these gymnasts at the Olympics, but I also admire the remarkable flexibility, strength, rhythm and composure of these Indians who participate in their traditional sport, Mallakhambh. Of course, you will not find Mallakhambh in this list of Olympic sports here, but does it mean that it is not a sport? Does it mean it is not popular in regions where millions reside? Maybe try beating these Indians in Mallakhambh. How about that? You may be a fan of various martial arts-related sports disciplines that are displayed on this official webpage of the Olympics, but I should confess that I am an admirer of Kalaripayattu and Gatka from India. I would love to see a foreigner giving a tough competition to a Kalaripayattu master from India. What do you think of that? Of course, this popular Indian sports discipline is also not on this Olympics list, even though it is popular among millions of people who reside on our planet. You may be a fan of rugby at the Olympics. Yes, I like rugby too, but I'm also a fan of Dobkhel from Assam in India, which is their indigenous game. You may be a fan of equestrian at the Olympics, but did you know that many in India love Kambala? Just look at this. Do these Indians not have the agility and strength of the highest order? Do these sports not require years of hard work, focus and discipline? And in case you are an animal lover, please familiarize yourself with the brutal treatment that many horses go through after they are retired from the racing industry. Yes, I enjoy watching rowing in Olympics, but I also enjoy the boat race in Heikru Hidongba in Manipur and the renowned Vallamkali of Kerala. Take a look. What a great demonstration of strength, agility, endurance and balance. Would you like to compete against Indians in that? Don't forget, these games or sports are popular among many, but of course are not on this Olympic sports list. Kabaddi is another traditional sport where Indians excel, but of course that sport is also not on this Olympic sports list. But these are just a few random examples that I have chosen. India has numerous indigenous sports and traditional games that Indians love and regularly participate in. Now, how can anyone tell you that India has a poor sports culture? It seems that India doesn't have a poor sports culture. It could be your poor understanding about India and possibly your limited understanding regarding the way Olympics were founded, designed and are being operated. And for that, let's focus on the point number 3. To start with, let me share something that you probably never knew or didn't pay attention to. Did you know that the Switzerland-based International Olympic Committee, or IOC, is an independent organization that is entirely privately funded? Not only that, the individual members of the IOC are not representatives of their countries in the IOC. Instead, quite strangely, they act as the ambassadors of Olympism in their countries of origin. This means that officially, IOC members do not represent the interest of their individual countries to the IOC. They are there to represent and promote the interest of the IOC instead. Can you believe that? It is not a surprise that it has been observed that the International Olympic Committee, as an oligarchic, self-co-opting organization with worldwide monopolistic tendencies, lacks democratic structure, legitimation, and control from below. And as far as the Western hegemony in the International Olympic Committee is concerned, pay attention to these numbers. Throughout its 120 years of existence, the International Olympic Committee has only had 9 presidents, 8 Europeans, 1 North American. Not only that, it was observed that the cities that were chosen to host the Summer Olympics, 50% were European cities, 23% American, 20% Asian, and 7% Oceanic. But the European hegemony in the IOC becomes apparent when we observe that the Olympic Games started at the height of the age of colonialism. It becomes even more apparent when we observe that colonizers use sports as a means of social control and as a means to redirect anger and aggression that may otherwise be leveled against colonizers. As colonizers use sports as a disciplinary tool, Western or Westernized sports gained popularity in the regions that they colonized. This article, published by the International Center for Olympic Studies, has explored the ugly side of the founder of the modern Olympic Games, Pierre de Coubertin. It mentions that in Pierre de Coubertin's opinion, only modern Western sports were civilized activities. Seriously? Only modern Western sports as civilized activities? How does that sound to you? Not only that, it goes on to explain how the legacy of this civilizing mission is still manifest in our times, as the Olympic Games still promote Western or Westernized sports exclusively, even though they claim to be a universal movement. Yes, this so-called universal movement seems to be fueling the sports monoculture when there are initiatives to expand Western sports disciplines into the last village in Africa, Asia, and Indo-America at the cost of the native and national physical cultures. According to the study by Mark Arthur David, the International Olympic Committee, IOC, becomes neo-colonizer when it sets as its primary goal to be embraced by all nations. It seeks to impose itself and its Western values on the mindset and culture of developing nations. But it is not only about the Olympics. In various international sports federations, Western and European functionaries still dominate, and institutional inequality results in economic dominance and neo-colonization by Western capitalism in sport. Point number 4. The ugly truth about the Olympic glory. Massive application of science at the top-level sports means that the individual achievement of the athlete is disappearing behind the achievement of the whole system. And of course, that system also includes performance-enhancing drug experts who know how to fool or game the system. As far as using science to cheat and manipulate is concerned, how can we forget the state-sponsored doping program of East Germany that continued until 1989? In order to turn their nation into a sporting superpower, East German officials pumped performance-enhancing drugs into the bodies of their athletes. Virtually all of East Germany's top champions had been doped under the state-sponsored program. Of course, those so-called advanced and cunning Europeans were using science that was probably unavailable to many poorer countries and were cheating their way to get the Olympic glory. It seems that even when it comes to cheating, those Westerners had some sort of technological advantage against their counterparts in Africa or India. But let us not forget that the cutting-edge techniques to fool the system are used even today. This article on Life Science mentions a survey of several thousand world-class amateur athletes in which up to 57% admitted to using performance-enhancing drugs in the past year. Thomas Hildebrand, a performance enhancement researcher, mentioned that the ability to beat doping tests continues to evolve, and the test will always be one step behind the perpetrators. Now, this may sound very unfair to the hardworking and honest athletes in the poor or developing nations, but the advanced nations who have a good grip on science seem to have some advantage there as well. Yes, it sounds unethical, but it appears that for many advanced nations, the Olympic glory is just too irresistible. But the story of modern Olympic Games is not limited to that. From performance-enhancing drugs to corruption and human rights scandals, there is a lot more that we can learn about these games. Number 5. India's challenges and a possible way forward. In a nation where many suffer from financial hardships, if sports do not offer a financially secure, pursuable career, quite understandably, there may be discouragement from families, guardians, or a wider community to participate in them. Despite such a rich culture in sports and games, it can be said that India didn't do enough to preserve and promote its traditional games, nor did it do enough to support the Olympic culture, thus losing on both fronts. As of today, a nation that is so rich in sports culture has only around 60 recognized national sports federations. Combine that with corruption, poor school infrastructure, gender inequality, lack of funds, poor strategy and vision, casteism, and various types of discrimination that can't be ruled out, and you may start to understand why India hasn't reached its full potential in the world of sports. India and Indians may want the Olympic glory too, but while going for it, shouldn't they also do enough to revive, preserve, or promote their traditional games and sports? After all, cultural self-determination is important for those who have been formerly colonized. And yes, India's heritage is a part of our global civilizational heritage, and the real champions of diversity shouldn't just let it die or disappear. Performance in the Olympic sports and their popularity cannot be the sole yardstick to measure if a nation loves sports or not. Neither can it conclude whether a nation is good or bad at sports. Indians have their own unique rich history of many traditional sports which they love and excel in. And yes, we shouldn't forget that the sports that are played in the Olympics are just a tiny fraction of sports and games that exist in our world. If the Olympic movement truly supports the global cultural diversity, shouldn't it ensure that more cultural elements from traditional sports from around the world are incorporated in a fair and balanced manner? See you again.